When I work with executives, sooner or later we end up talking about how they can improve their relationships and their communications with the people that they supervise. And one of the things I share with them that helps in thinking about this is a model that was popularized in the 1960s called transactional analysis. The basis of this model is the understanding that we build our social scripts as very, very young children, and they stay with us throughout the rest of our lives. So we first talk about what these scripts look like, and it helps them to understand how they come into play in the workplace. First of all, as children, we have parents who are nurturing parents, so we'll call that NP. These are the parents who love us, who cheer every time we do something new, who just enjoy being a parent and tell us that they appreciate us as being a part of their family. The other script, which is just as important when we're young, is what we refer to as the critical parent. This is the disciplinarian, the parent who says, don't do this, no, don't do that. And we really need both. The nurturing parent represents love in the relationship, and the critical parent represents discipline in the relationship. And without that, we don't grow up to be very healthy individuals. We respond to these in two different ways. The first way that we respond as young children is what I call the adaptive child. And that's where we're saying, Mommy, Daddy, I want you to approve me. And so we play along with the things that we know are going to get their praise. And then the second script that we develop, which again is just as important because it helps to establish us in our adulthood, is we develop what I would call the rebellious child. And that's where we say no, and we assert our will. Now, of course, we need the critical parent to discipline that. But when we grow up, our parents want us to have some willpower. They don't want us to just say yes to everything that comes along. So we need to develop both of these scripts, and we get to know them based on both of these scripts. And so we've got all kinds of things that are happening as we're growing up. And incidentally, some parents are better as nurturing parents. Other parents are better as critical parents. And that's why it's good to have two parents, because the combination of the two oftentimes is what provides for a great experience as a child growing up. So these social scripts are built into our brain, and they don't leave just because we've grown up. However, as we get into junior high and high school, our social relationships become more and more complex, and we begin to develop additional scripts. And in the transactional analysis model, the healthy scripts that we develop are first the mature adult. This is an adult who is objective, who's investigative or analytical. It's the way that we look at something without getting emotionally involved, but we just look at the facts and we make smart decisions or smart conclusions based on looking at those facts. And then there's still this part in us that I like to call the playful child. This is still the inquisitive, the creative, the fun-loving, a little bit mischievous part of us that we call the child within when we become adults. So this is a pretty simple model to understand. What I try to explain to the executives that I'm working with is that as we grow up, it's important, and as we supervise, it's important for us to use these three scripts in the workplace. So nurturing parent, that's good to use in the workplace to affirm your employees. Mature adult, to be analytical, to be objective, to be non-judgmental, that's a great script to use in the workplace. Playful child, to be inquisitive and creative and fun-loving, that's great in the work. All of these work well in the workplace. What isn't so healthy is for us to use the critical parent in the workplace. When we say, George, don't do it that way, and we sound like George's mother or father, it's very easy for us to trigger in George this script of the adaptive child or the rebellious child. With the rebellious child, George pushes back and we have a relationship problem. With the adaptive child, George says, whatever you say, Dad, and loses initiative and ceases to be a mature adult in the way that he does his work. So we can see this anytime that we are critical, we're saying no, 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 no. Instead, what we need to do as supervisors is come over here and use the mature adult saying, George, let's look at the facts objectively. Let's identify what's taken place. Let's identify what was good about it. And let's identify what you could have done better. Or we can be a little bit playful with George and say, you know what, George, I know that happened, and I know that you've got a good heart, and have a little bit of fun together. In any case, we should be spending as much of our time in these three, the nurturing parent, the mature adult, and the playful child, and no more than 35% of our time in the nurturing parent. What happens when somebody spends all their time as a leader in the nurturing parent? You're actually being too nurturing, and your people don't feel accountable anymore. They think that, well, they can do anything, or they don't understand that the mature adult, where we look objectively at the results that are being created, and they're judged based on the results, not based on love alone, that creates the highest amount of performance in the workplace. So I realize this is a relatively simple model, But I tell my executives to start listening for these scripts. Do you hear yourself speaking as a critical parent? Do you hear your employees responding as rebellious children or as adaptive children? If you hear that happening, you know that you're losing energy, you're losing effectiveness in the workplace, and you need to work on bringing things over into these other scripts. And in doing that, you can have a big impact on the quality of your relationships and the value of the communication that takes place.